I stood in the doorway of the living room, invisible as always, watching my parents present my younger sister Emma with an envelope stuffed with cash. It was my 18th birthday, the same date we'd shared for the past 4 years, since they adopted her when she was 10 and I was 14. Emma, sweetheart, this is from all your aunts and uncles, Mom cooed, stroking Emma's golden hair. They're so proud of you for getting into Stanford early admission. I felt the familiar sting, but this time something was different. This time I knew exactly what was in that envelope. $8,000. Money that relatives had sent for me, for my birthday, my graduation, my future. Money with cards that said my name. But like every year since Emma arrived, my mother had simply scratched out Rachel and written Emma instead. In my previous life, I'd only discovered this 3 years later when Aunt Linda drunkenly mentioned at Thanksgiving how she'd sent me $500 for my 18th birthday and hoped I'd used it well for college. By then, I'd already been drowning in student loans while Emma glided through Stanford on my stolen birthday money and our parents' entire savings account. But I wasn't that Rachel anymore. I'd died at 28, alone in a studio apartment I could barely afford, having cut off my family years earlier after discovering the full scope of their betrayal. I'd cried myself to sleep one too many nights, taken one too many sleeping pills to quiet the pain, and woken up in my 14-year-old body on the day Emma came home. 4 years I'd played the long game. 4 years I'd endured, planned, and built my escape. And today, on my 18th birthday, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was rich. Did you hear me, Rachel? My father's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. Stop lurking and get in here. We need to talk about your plans. I walked in slowly, keeping my face carefully neutral. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Another notification from my stock portfolio app. Another $1,000 in gains. I'd made my first million 3 months ago, and I was on track to double it by summer. Yes, Dad? He exchanged a glance with my mother, and I saw the familiar expression, the one that said I was an inconvenience, a disappointment, a burden they'd been stuck with. Your mother and I have been discussing your future. We think it's best if you take a gap year. Work, maybe. Help out with expenses. But Dad, Emma interrupted, her voice sugary sweet. Rachel should still go to college eventually, right? I mean, she got into state. The way she said state dripped with condescension. She knew I'd also gotten into Stanford, the same Stanford she was attending on my stolen money. But our parents had hidden my acceptance letter. I knew because I'd been expecting it. In my previous life, I'd only found that letter years later, buried in the garage, opened and read and discarded like trash. Community college? Maybe, Mom said, not even looking at me. After you've saved some money. We've given everything to get Emma where she needs to be. You understand, don't you, Rachel? She's special. She's going to be someone. And I'm no one, I finished silently. That's what they'd always thought. I understand perfectly, I said, and I meant it. I understood that they'd drained their accounts for Emma's designer wardrobe, her tutors, her summer programs in Europe. I understood that they'd taken every gift meant for me. Birthday money, Christmas checks, graduation bonds from my grandparents before they died, and given it all to her. I understood that my mother had told our relatives I was troubled and ungrateful, so they'd stop asking about me. I understood everything, and I'd planned for all of it. Good girl, Dad said, already turning back to Emma. Now, Emma, let's discuss your dorm furniture budget. I walked back to my room, the smallest bedroom, the one that used to be a storage closet, and closed the door. Then I opened my laptop and checked my accounts. Cryptocurrency, stocks, 3 online businesses, and a healthy cash reserve in an account my parents didn't know existed. $1,247,382. I'd made my first million by being reborn with 4 years of future knowledge and absolutely nothing to lose. The adoption of Emma had destroyed my life the first time around. I remembered the day she arrived with perfect, painful clarity, both lives worth of it now. I'd been 14, they'd told me we were getting a foster sister, and I'd been excited. I was lonely, bookish, awkward. The idea of a sister felt like a gift. Emma was 10, blonde, blue-eyed, and had clearly learned early how to work the system. She'd been in foster care since she was 6, and she knew exactly what adults wanted to see. Within a week, she was calling my parents mom and dad. Within a month, they'd started adoption proceedings. Within 3 months, I'd become invisible in my own home. It wasn't dramatic at first. Small things. Emma needed new clothes because she'd grown out of her foster wardrobe. Designer clothes, it turned out. Emma needed a bigger room because she had nightmares. My room, which I was moved out of into the storage closet. Emma needed tutoring because she was so bright but behind from her troubled start. Tutoring that cost hundreds per week. Meanwhile, my piano lessons were canceled. My art classes were too expensive. My college fund, the one my grandparents had started when I was born, was quietly absorbed into the general family account temporarily and never seen again. But I'd loved her at first. I'd tried so hard to be a good big sister. I'd helped with her homework, shared my books, defended her at school. And she'd smiled at me with those innocent blue eyes and plotted how to take everything I had. The first major betrayal came when I was 16. I'd won a regional writing competition, a full scholarship to a prestigious summer program for young writers. I'd been ecstatic. It was the first time I'd felt special, seen, worthy of attention. Emma was 12 then, and she'd cried to our parents that she felt left out. She wanted to go to a summer program too. So they found one, an expensive writing camp in Colorado, and used my scholarship to pay for it. They told the writing program I was declining due to family circumstances and asked if someone else could take my spot. I'd only found out when I showed up with my packed bag the morning we were supposed to leave, and Mom told me she was driving Emma to the airport instead. "Don't be selfish, Rachel," she'd said, "and Emma's been through so much. You can write anytime. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her." In my first life, I'd cried for weeks. I'd pulled away, become sullen and angry, which only confirmed their narrative that I was jealous and troubled. This time, at 14 years old with a 28-year-old's mind, I'd watched Emma arrive and immediately started planning. I'd known what was coming. I'd known that by my 18th birthday, I'd be thoroughly erased from my own family, expected to sacrifice everything for the golden child they'd chosen to replace me. So, I'd started small. At 14, I'd taken the $300 I'd saved from birthdays before Emma, money I'd hidden in a box under my bed, and opened an online brokerage account using a fake birth date. I'd bought Bitcoin when it was $800. I'd sold some of it at $19,000, then bought back in at $6,000 during the crash. I'd invested in Tesla, Amazon, Netflix. I'd known every major market movement for the next 4 years, and I'd played them perfectly. At 15, I'd started dropshipping businesses using Shopify, selling products I knew would trend on TikTok before TikTok even became huge in the US. I'd learned web design, affiliate marketing, social media growth hacking. Every dollar I made went back into investments. At 16, I'd started freelance writing under a pseudonym, commanding high rates because I knew exactly what content would go viral. I'd ghostwritten articles, managed social media accounts for small businesses, built an audience for an anonymous blog that made thousands in ad revenue. At 17, I'd registered an LLC in Delaware, kept meticulous records, paid estimated taxes quarterly, and watched my net worth climb into 6 figures while my family thought I was working minimum wage shifts at the local library. I had worked at the library 3 hours a week, just enough to maintain the story. The rest of the time, I was building an empire from my storage closet bedroom on a laptop I'd bought myself. And through it all, I'd played the role they expected. Quiet Rachel, mousy Rachel, Rachel who didn't complain when Emma got a new MacBook and she got a used Chromebook, Rachel who nodded along when they said there wasn't money for her college applications but somehow found $15,000 for Emma's college preparatory consultant. I'd eaten the scraps of their attention and let them think I was crushed under their neglect, all while I was documenting everything. Every stolen birthday card, every redirected check, every lie they told about me to relatives, every college rejection letter they hid, every door of opportunity they slammed in my face, because I knew that the revenge wouldn't be sweet unless they truly believed they'd won first. The turning point had actually come months before my 18th birthday, but it crystallized that night after they gave Emma my birthday money. I'd always known this moment would come, the final, ultimate betrayal where they'd openly tell me I didn't matter. In my first life, it had broken me. I'd left home with nothing, struggled through community college while working 3 jobs, and spent years in therapy trying to understand why my own parents had erased me for a stranger. This time, I'd been ready, more than ready. I waited until the house was asleep, then opened my laptop and started executing the final phase of my plan. I'd been preparing for months, gathering every piece of evidence, every document, every paper trail of their financial abuse. I had bank statements showing the redirected funds. I had photographs of birthday cards with my name scratched out. I had recorded conversations legal in our state where they discussed hiding opportunities from me. I had emails from relatives asking about me that my mother had never passed along. But more importantly, I had power now, real financial power. I started with the easy part. I emailed my acceptance letter from Stanford. Yes, I had found where they'd hidden it, photographed it, and resealed it to myself from an encrypted account. I documented the date I'd been accepted versus the date they'd told me I was rejected. I compiled every scholarship I'd won that they'd declined on my behalf, every honor society invitation they'd thrown away, every teacher recommendation they'd intercepted. Then I moved to the financial documentation. I created a detailed spreadsheet of every dollar that had been meant for me and redirected to Emma. Birthday money, Christmas gifts, my college fund, bonds from my grandparents' estate. I had bank statements, obtained through a combination of my mother's terrible password security and my willingness to search through their files when they were out. I had proof of what I called financial parentification, the times they'd made me pay rent from my supposed library job while Emma paid nothing. The total came to $97,000 over 4 years, nearly $100,000 stolen from a child. But I wasn't interested in taking them to court. That would take years, cost money, and frankly, I had something better in mind. I wanted them to understand, truly understand, what they'd thrown away. I opened my LLC's business account and started making transfers. I paid off the mortgage on a small condo I'd purchased in cash 6 months ago in my name, waiting until I was 18 to finalize the deed. I verified my acceptance to Stanford, this time directly with the admissions office, providing documentation of my situation. I called the financial aid office and explained that I'd been financially abused and would be filing as an independent student. With my documentation, they fast-tracked my case. Then I did something I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I called my father's older brother, Uncle James. Uncle James had never liked Emma. He'd always been kind to me, but after Emma's arrival, he'd slowly stopped coming around. I remembered from my first life that he'd had a falling out with my parents over something, but I'd never known what. This time, I knew exactly what it was. He'd confronted them about their treatment of me, and they'd cut him off. Rachel? His voice was surprised when he answered. It was 1 a.m., but I knew he was a night owl. Is everything okay? Uncle James, I need to tell you something, I said. I need you to listen without interrupting because I'm only going to say this once. I told him everything. The stolen money, the hidden acceptance letters, the systematic erasure of my existence in favor of Emma. I sent him the documentation as we talked, and then I told him about the money I'd made, the life I'd built in secret, the fact that I was leaving in 2 days and never coming back. There was a long silence when I finished. Jesus Christ, Rachel, he finally said. I knew it was bad, but your mother told me you were acting out, that you were jealous of Emma, that you needed space. I should have. It's fine, I cut him off. I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling because I need witnesses. I'm leaving and they're going to try to tell people I'm troubled or ungrateful or mentally ill. I need people who know the truth. What do you need? I'm sending you a sealed envelope. Inside is documentation of everything, every dollar they stole, every opportunity they sabotaged, every lie they told. If they try to come after me legally, or if they try to destroy my reputation, I need you to be ready to testify to what you know. Can you do that? Absolutely, but Rachel, where will you go? I have a place and I have money, more than they ever gave Emma, and I earned every cent of it myself. I could hear the smile in his voice. You always were the smart one. Your grandparents would be proud. That almost broke my carefully maintained composure. Thank you. After I hung up, I made 2 more calls to my Aunt Linda and to a cousin who'd always been kind. I built my support network, my witnesses, my insurance policy. Then I drafted an email to my parents, scheduled to send in 48 hours after I was already gone. The email was simple. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. I know about the stolen money, the hidden letters, all of it. I have documentation of everything you've done. I'm not pressing charges that would require me to care about you enough to seek justice. Instead, I'm simply moving on to the life I deserve, the life I built for myself while you were busy erasing me. You wanted to give Emma everything, and you did. You gave her my birthday money, my college fund, my opportunities. I hope it was worth it. Because what you didn't realize is that you can't steal someone's worth. You can only steal money. I made my first million without you. I got into Stanford without you. I built a future without you, and I'll live the rest of my life without you. Don't contact me. I have nothing left to say. Rachel. The climax came not with a bang, but with a slow, delicious unraveling. I left 2 days after my 18th birthday while they were at Emma's college preparation event. I'd packed only what I needed: clothes, my laptop, my important documents that I'd been slowly smuggling out and storing at my new condo. I left my old cell phone on the bed with a note that said simply, "I bought my own phone. You can keep this one." I drove my car, a used Honda I'd bought with my own money that they assumed was borrowed from a friend, to my condo across town. It was small but mine. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a living room with space for a proper desk. I'd furnished it over the past 2 months using online shopping and delivery services, timing it all for when my parents thought I was at my library job. The email sent on schedule. My phone, my real phone, the one they didn't know about, started buzzing within an hour. Calls from my mother, from my father, voicemails that started angry and evolved into panicked. I didn't listen to them. I'd heard enough from them to last a lifetime. Instead, I focused on my next move. I'd been accepted to Stanford, but I deferred my admission by a year. I had plans that couldn't wait, and I wanted to arrive at Stanford not as a struggling freshman, but as someone established. I spent the next month scaling my businesses. I hired a small team of freelancers to handle the day-to-day operations of my dropshipping stores. I invested heavily in a few key opportunities I knew would pay off. A small startup that would be acquired by Google in 8 months. Cryptocurrency positions that would triple by year's end. I worked 18-hour days, not because I had to, but because I could finally do it in peace, in my own space, without pretending to be less than I was. The real satisfaction came in pieces, through the grapevine of relatives and family friends. Uncle James called me 2 weeks after I left. "You need to hear this," he said. Your parents showed up at my house yesterday. And? They wanted me to tell them where you were. Your mother was hysterical. She kept saying you'd stolen from them, that you were mentally ill, that they were worried about you. So I showed them the documentation you sent me. I felt a cold smile cross my face. "What?" did they say. Your father went white. Just absolutely white. Your mother tried to deny it, said I was misunderstanding, but I had the bank statements right there. The birthday cards with your name scratched out. The emails from relatives asking about you that she'd never answered. Rachel, I've never seen anyone backpedal so fast. Did they admit it? Not in so many words. But your father said something interesting. He said, "We did what we had to do. Emma needed it more." And I told him that wasn't for them to decide. That they'd stolen from you, systematically, for years. That they'd committed financial abuse against their own daughter. What did Mom say? She cried, said they'd given you a home, food, everything you needed. That you were being ungrateful. So I asked her, if you're so ungrateful, why did you hide Rachel's Stanford acceptance letter? There was satisfaction in his voice, and I felt a warmth in my chest. Justice, even secondhand, felt good. She couldn't answer that, Uncle James continued. She just kept crying and saying I didn't understand. Then they left. But Rachel, before they went, your father asked something that I think you should know about. What? He asked if you had money. Specifically, he asked if you'd gotten an inheritance from someone or if someone was supporting you. He seemed fixated on it. Of course he was. They'd cut me off completely, expected me to flounder, and now I was gone and unreachable. They were trying to figure out how I'd escaped. Let them wonder, I said. But they didn't just wonder, they investigated. I found out later, through Aunt Linda, who heard it from a neighbor, that my parents had filed a missing persons report. The police had come to the house, asked questions, and then called me directly on my new number that I'd provided to the school district when I withdrew. Ms. Chen, The officer's voice was professional but kind. I'm Officer Martinez. Your parents filed a report. They're worried about you. I'm fine. I'm 18. I left of my own free will and I'm safe. Can you tell me where you're staying? With all due respect, officer, I'm an adult and I'm not in danger. My parents and I have irreconcilable differences, and I've chosen to live independently. I'm happy to come to the station to verify I'm safe if that's necessary, but I'm not going to disclose my location to them. There was a pause. Your parents mentioned some concerning things. They said you might have stolen money from them, that you might be involved in something illegal. I'd been expecting this. Officer, I have documentation of every dollar I've earned and every legitimate business I run. I've filed taxes. I have an LLC. Everything is completely above board. What my parents are actually concerned about is that I discovered they've been stealing from me for years. Birthday money, my college fund, funds from relatives meant for me. I have documentation of that as well, and witnesses. If they'd like to involve the police, I'm happy to press charges for financial abuse and fraud. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Would you be willing to come in and make a statement, just so we can close this case properly? Of course. I went to the police station the next day with a folder full of documentation and the contact information for Uncle James and my lawyer. Yes, I'd hired a lawyer the day I turned 18. The officer looked through everything, asked me a few questions about my well-being, and then closed the case. For what it's worth, Officer Martinez said as I was leaving, I've seen situations like this before. Parents who have trouble adjusting when their kids don't fit the mold they expected. You seem like you have your head on straight. Good luck. The missing persons case was closed. My parents' attempt to paint me as troubled or criminal had failed, and word spread through our extended family faster than wildfire. Aunt Linda called me, furious on my behalf. Your mother told me you'd run away with some boy. She said you were on drugs. Rachel, I'm so sorry I didn't reach out sooner. I should have known something was wrong. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. They're good at controlling the narrative. Not anymore, they're not. I called everyone. Your cousins, your uncle in Boston, your grandmother's sister. I told them what really happened, about the money, the college letters, all of it. No one is speaking to your parents right now. And Emma? What about Emma? She called me. She was crying, said she didn't know about the money, that she thought it was all gifts from your parents. She said your mother had told her you didn't want birthday parties, that you were too mature for that kind of thing. Rachel, I think she genuinely didn't know. That surprised me. In my first life, I'd always assumed Emma had been complicit. But maybe she'd just been a kid, accepting what was given to her, believing the lies she was told. It doesn't matter now, I said, and I meant that too. Forgiveness wasn't on the table, but understanding was. Emma had been a tool of my parents' betrayal, but maybe not an active participant. The weeks turned into months. I didn't go to Stanford that fall. I'd deferred, wanting to build my businesses first. Instead, I worked. I grew my portfolio to $2 million, then $3 million. I invested in real estate, bought a second property, started a consulting business helping other young entrepreneurs build their online presence. And then, 6 months after I left, the real climax hit. Emma called me, not from her personal phone, but from a friend's number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Rachel? Her voice was small, frightened. Please don't hang up. What do you want, Emma? I need help. Mom and Dad are in trouble, big trouble. I felt my heart rate pick up, but my voice stayed calm. What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. They took out loans to pay for my Stanford tuition. A lot of loans. And Dad's business is failing, and they can't make the payments, and now they're saying they might lose the house, and her voice broke into sobs. I closed my eyes. In my first life, I'd known my parents had struggled financially after Emma went to college, but I'd been too far removed, too hurt to know the details. They'd been too proud to ask for help, and I'd been too wounded to offer. Now I was hearing that they'd essentially bankrupted themselves, trying to maintain their perfect life with their perfect daughter. And you're calling me because... Because mom said, she said you had money, that you were doing well. She said maybe you'd help. The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity of it. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. Mom and Dad spent 4 years stealing from me. They took my birthday money, my college fund, my opportunities. They hid my Stanford acceptance letter so they could send you instead. They told everyone I was troubled and ungrateful. They filed a false police report when I left. And now that they're in financial trouble, trouble caused by their choice to give you everything, they want me to bail them out? Rachel, please, put Mom on the phone. There was shuffling, whispered conversation, and then my mother's voice, tight with desperation. Rachel, thank God we need to talk. No, you need to listen. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm blocking this number. You made your choice 4 years ago when Emma came into our lives. You chose her over me, repeatedly, systematically, completely. You stole from me. You lied to me. You tried to sabotage my future, and now that your choices have consequences, you want me to fix it. Rachel, please, we're family. No, you're not my family. You stopped being my family when you erased me for her, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to figure this out yourselves. You're going to downsize, sell the house if you have to, take responsibility for the choices you made. Emma is going to learn that Stanford isn't a birthright, and maybe she'll even get a job to help out. And I'm going to continue building the life I deserve. Rachel, don't do this. We're going to lose everything. You already lost everything, I said softly. You lost it 4 years ago when you decided I wasn't worth loving. You just didn't notice until now. I hung up. Then I blocked the number and Emma's number and my parents' numbers. I blocked them on every platform, every avenue of contact. I changed my email, updated my address with the few relatives I still spoke to, and made it clear I was done. But I wasn't quite finished with my revenge. A week later, I received a message from Stanford's financial aid office. Emma had filed a FAFSA claiming she'd be getting financial support from her parents, but they'd defaulted on their payment plan for her spring semester. The school was asking if I, as a family member who'd been listed on some forms, knew anything about the situation. I called them directly. I explained calmly and professionally that I'd cut ties with my family due to abuse and that I'd documented their financial situation. I offered to provide documentation if needed. The financial aid officer thanked me and said they'd work with Emma directly. Emma ended up taking a leave of absence from Stanford. I heard through Aunt Linda that she'd come home, gotten a job at a local restaurant, and was saving up to return. My parents had sold their house and moved into a small apartment. My father's business had closed. They were surviving, but barely. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet sense of closure. Because the real revenge wasn't their suffering. The real revenge was my success. I started at Stanford the following fall, not as a struggling freshman, but as a young entrepreneur with a 7-figure net worth and a portfolio of businesses. I rented a beautiful apartment near campus, no dorms for me, and furnished it exactly how I wanted. I bought the latest laptop, the best study resources, everything I needed to excel. I threw myself into my studies with the same intensity I'd thrown into building my businesses. Computer science and economics, double major, minor in creative writing. I joined clubs, made friends, dated casually. I lived the life I'd been denied, the life I'd built for myself. In my sophomore year, I sold my largest business for $4.5 million. The buyer was a major e-commerce company looking to expand into my niche, and they'd been impressed with my metrics, my customer base, my growth trajectory. At 19 years old, I became a multimillionaire. I invested most of it, kept working on new projects, and graduated summa cum laude with job offers from Google, Amazon, and 3 hot startups. I chose a startup that offered me equity, worked there for 2 years while building my own company on the side, and then left to run my own business full-time. By 25, I was worth $30 million. I'd built a successful software company, invested in dozens of other startups, and been featured in Forbes' 30 under 30. I lived in a beautiful loft in San Francisco, drove my dream car, traveled the world between projects. I'd made it. Not despite my family, but because of them. Because they'd forced me to become self-sufficient, to be smarter, to be stronger, to be absolutely certain I could survive alone. The epilogue came on my 26th birthday. I was having dinner at an exclusive restaurant with friends when I saw her. Emma. She was serving our table. She'd aged in the way people do when life has been hard. Still pretty, but tired. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her uniform was neat but worn. She didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed my hair, my style, everything about my presentation. I looked like money now, because I had it, but I recognized her instantly. "Emma?" I said quietly, and she froze. Her eyes widened. "Rachel? Oh my God, Rachel!" My friends looked between us curiously, but I kept my expression neutral. Small world. I... You look amazing. Do you live here? I do. I run a software company. It's going well. She glanced around at my friends, the expensive wine we'd ordered, the obvious markers of success. I saw something crumble in her face, not jealousy, but something sadder. Regret, maybe? Or just the weight of understanding what could have been. "Rachel, She lowered her voice. "I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know back then. I really didn't know what they were doing, but I should have questioned it. I should have been a better sister." I studied her for a long moment. She looked sincere. Broken, even. I knew from Aunt Linda that Emma had never gone back to Stanford, that she'd been working multiple jobs to help support our parents, that she'd sacrificed her own dreams to fix the mess they'd created. In a way, she'd become me, the forgotten daughter, the one who gave up everything, the one who carried the burden. "I believe you," I said finally. "For what it's worth, I don't blame you. You were a kid. They used you as much as they neglected me." Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom and Dad, they talk about you sometimes. They know about your success. They see your pictures online. Mom cries a lot. That's not my problem anymore. I know, I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry." I nodded. "Thank you. I hope things get better for you, Emma. I really do." She took our orders with shaking hands and disappeared into the kitchen. I didn't see her again that night, but when the check came, there was a note tucked inside. "Thank you for being kind. Didn't have to be. You deserved better from all of us. Emma." I left a $1,000 tip because I could afford to be generous now, because her suffering didn't bring me joy the way I'd once thought it would. 2 years later, on my 28th birthday, the age I'd been when I died in my first life, I did something unexpected. I set up a trust fund. Not for Emma, not for my parents, but for young people escaping abusive family situations. I called it the Second Chances Scholarship, and I funded it with $5 million. Recipients would get full college tuition, housing stipend, therapy sessions, and mentorship from successful people who'd survived similar situations. The only requirement was proof of documented family abuse and a determination to break the cycle. When the first scholarship announcement went out, I got an email from an anonymous account. "Is this really you, Rachel? Is this your scholarship?" I recognized the writing style. "Emma." I replied simply, "Yes, apply if you want. You'd qualify." She did apply. She wrote an essay about being used as a weapon against her sister, about discovering too late the harm that had been done, about working 3 jobs while taking night classes at community college, about her parents' inability to acknowledge their mistakes, even as they lived in poverty, about her own complicity, even as a child, and her determination to be better. She was one of 20 recipients that year. I didn't meet with her personally, that would have been too much, but I followed her progress through the program reports. She went back to school, graduated with honors in social work. Last I heard, she was working with foster children, trying to prevent other kids from becoming weapons in family dysfunction. I'd like to say I forgave my parents, but I didn't. Forgiveness requires remorse, and they never expressed any. They lived out their lives in that small apartment, aging and angry, confused about how they'd lost everything. When my father died of a heart attack when I was 30, I sent flowers to the funeral but didn't attend. When my mother followed 2 years later, I did the same. Emma called me after Mom's funeral. She asked for you at the end, she said quietly. She wanted to apologize. But she didn't actually apologize when she had the chance. No, she didn't. Then it doesn't count. We didn't speak again after that. Some wounds are too deep for reconciliation, even with the best intentions. Now at 32, I'm exactly where I want to be. My company went public last year, and I'm worth more than $100 million. I have friends who love me, partners who respect me, a life full of meaning and purpose. I donate millions to causes I believe in. I mentor young entrepreneurs. I live in a house I designed myself, filled with art and light and everything beautiful I was denied as a child. And sometimes, late at night, I think about that 14-year-old girl who woke up in her old body with a second chance, who decided that the best revenge wasn't making her family suffer, it was making them irrelevant. I think about how I stood in that doorway on my 18th birthday, watching them give Emma my birthday money, and how I knew, really knew, that it didn't matter. Because I'd already made my first million. Because I'd already won. The money they stole, I made it back 100 times over. The opportunities they blocked, I created better ones. The love they withheld, I found it in people who actually deserved my trust. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could make me nothing. Instead, they made me unstoppable. I let them give her my birthday money because I'd already made my first million. But more than that, I'd made myself. And that was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. That was the real victory. Not their downfall, but my rise. I built an empire from nothing, and I did it alone, and I did it in spite of them. And every day I wake up in my beautiful home with my successful business, with my chosen family. I know that I won, not because they lost everything, but because I gained everything that actually matters, and that is the sweetest revenge of all.